Good morning, everybody, and welcome in to Morning in the Word. Glad that you've joined us today. Today, we're going to take a little bit of a deviation from the normal kind of approach that we have. Typically, what I try to do is give you a couple of insights or some thoughts, maybe a question to ponder or a meditation to reflect on as you read your chapter. Today, instead, I'm going to give you a little historical background because I think without some historical background, this chapter becomes very difficult to understand. And with some historical background, this chapter becomes very eye-opening and very enlightening. The city of Nineveh is the capital of the Assyrian Empire. And as we know in Nahum chapter 1, which we read yesterday, the people of both Judah and Israel have been invaded by the Assyrian Empire. In fact, Israel has rebelled and been completely destroyed and will never again reappear in world history. Judah has remained a vassal state. They have no freedoms, but they have still maintained their identity. And so it's into this scene that we find ourselves in Nahum chapter 2. The Assyrian people are notoriously cruel and have been very, very hard overlords, and it leads to a revolt where several nations come together to try to overthrow their overlords. And this is the subject matter of chapter 2. It takes us to the year 612, the culmination of this rebellious attack in what's called the Battle of Nineveh. And the Battle of Nineveh is a remarkably vicious and just a horrifying battle in world history. Outside of the scope of biblical history, this is recognized in world history as being a just absolutely gargantuan struggle that cost the lives of so many, countless people, both combatants and civilians as well. The city was destroyed. The battle took place between what is called commonly in the Bible the Medo-Persian Empire, what's commonly called by historians the Medo-Babylonian Empire, or even the Medo-Babylonian Scythian Empire. And this coalition of countries come together to form what really becomes the third most powerful Mesopotamian empire of that time period. Assyria would probably be the most powerful. Babylonians, which the Assyrians defeated, probably the second most, and this one weaker still than those, but still an impressive empire in the fact that they took over Babylonia. Assyria. Now, there is some interesting things here that contributed to the fall of Nineveh that I think are contributors, but they're kind of sideline items. There had been a couple of years of drought. There had been some overcrowding in the cities. The nation itself had become a little unstabilized in its workforce. There was a downturn in productivity because of what scholars talk about with in deeply scholarly academic terms, they got fat and lazy. And I think this is oftentimes the downfall of many a nation. A scrappy, young, hungry country gets some success and finds itself fat and lazy, and then prone for defeat and downfall the first time that hardship comes. There's a lesson in there for us, but we'll pass on that lesson and stay with the lesson on hand. It might be that you've seen a famous picture of this. There's a painting by the artist John Martin that depicts the defeat of Nineveh, and it's a haunting painting. Spent a little time this morning looking back at it, and frankly, this time of morning I should not have. The point that I want to make today is that the book of Nahum was written some 40 years before these events happened. Now, let that sink in for a second. He is going to write with enormously detailed writing. He's going to talk about the chariots like flashing like fire, which is interesting because that's one of the approaches that they used. They took chariots and they dashed around the city very quickly and they lit fire to things. And that was a very clear picture. It talks about the river gates, and they would be opened. And it talks about that the city of Nineveh would be like water. And this is interesting too, because one of the approaches, one of the battle plans that they employed, according to historians, was that they came to the river that was outside there. They dammed it, they diverted a conduit into the city proper, and then released that water, and in doing so created a massive artificial flood wall that just devastated the city. It talks about the suffering of the people, the enormous suffering of the people, the women that beat their chests in agony and moan like doves. This is a tragic reality of this particular battle. Historians tell us that the fighting went on house to house, a butchery and slaughter that lasted for months and months. And indeed, the devastation of the people, civilian populace, was just absolutely mind-numbingly bad. The point that I'm making with this is that the prophecies of God are so clear and so detailed and so accurate that even one historian, mockingly, cynically, with unbelief, wrote in his historical account that the book of Nahum reads so much more like a history account than it does a prophetic oracle. He was saying it out of unbelief, that there's no way this could have been written ahead of time because it so clearly and accurately depicts in detail. Well, we believe that it was written in the 640s, 650s, and it was written some 40 years or so prior to these events in 612, 614, whenever it happened. And when you put all that together, what you've got is another picture of how God's prophetic word is so clear and so powerful and so reliable. And if God can be so accurate and so clear and so reliable in his prophecies from 614 BC, how can he not be trusted with his promises for today? If he knew the future then, how can we not trust him to act boldly in our future now? I know this isn't a chapter that lends itself to a lot of optimistic, positive, upbeat kind of things moving forward, but perhaps this one thought will be something you'll give some consideration to. The same God who knew those things is the same God who knows tomorrow and who looks ahead and who prepares his people for what they will need. And he is all we have. But thank God, he is all we need. I hope you have a great day. Nahum chapter 2. Enjoy your read today, and we'll see you back in here tomorrow.